of Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan and on President Cyril calling on President Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC not to give in to threats by the EFF to disrupt next month's State of the Nation address if Gordhan remains in office. Well, earlier we spoke to Nishaan Balton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation.
It's consistent with the support rendered to him by Ahmed Kathrada well before his death, and not because of a particular like or dislike for Minister Gordhan, but because of adherence to a particular set of values, namely, I think, the kind of ethics that Tuli Madonsela herself was talking about a few minutes earlier, and the need to ensure that there is a focus on the big issue of state capture rather than be sidetracked by, I think, issues about where the particular function of ESCOM should be located or who the minister should or shouldn't be. We think that the veterans were extremely spot on in terms of their analysis of the issue, in that the entire blame for ESCOM and its maladministration must be traced back to its root causes, and amongst those is the 10 years of looting and dismantling of ESCOM that we are now seeing the consequences of.
All right, Nishaan, what do you think is behind the so-called sustained attacks against the minister?
Well, we can only assume that, and one, I would hope that it has not got to do with race. If it has got to do with race, I think it would be the weakest amongst the reasons. If there were reasons put forward to show that Minister Gordhan had been implicated in issues of corruption, then we would be amongst the first to support him being dismissed with immediate effect. But given that that is not the case, we can only assume it's because his stance on corruption, his stance on wanting to fix up these state-owned enterprises, and the fact that there are many who are likely to be implicated in the ongoing anti-corruption work in ESCOM and on all of the state-owned enterprises. This is a concerted effort by many of those who might be implicated in actions to come, or whose contracts might have been impacted on by the work that he has already started. So we think it's directly linked to those particular issues. Then there are others who have had ongoing ideological battles with Minister Gordhan, as if his views don't represent that of the party. And in attacking him, they would really just be attacking the positions of the party that Mr. Gordhan belongs to. But the third issue is that the attack really is seen as an attack on the president, given that he has placed Minister Gordhan in that position and has given him a particular mandate to execute, and has been Minister Gordhan has been one of the key backers of President Ramaphosa, and therefore getting rid of him in the view of the veterans weakens the president substantially in the overall fight against state capture and corruption in this country.
Well, for more analysis, we're now joined in studio by a political analyst. That's Jamie Mighti. Good afternoon, Jamie. Thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, Jamie. Well, you just heard the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation there saying the ANC veterans are on point, saying that those wanting Pravin Gordhan gone also want to remove the president, and that these are the actual enablers of state capture. Do they have a point, Jamie?
So one word that I heard a lot of there was assumption. There was an assumption that it's about race, an assumption that it's about corruption, an assumption that it's about placement of ESCOM, an assumption that it's about ideology. I think that we have to take people at face value and not assume things, because otherwise we're taking part in a speculative game. So I don't think that the critical issues that have been raised are actually about the race of the minister. I do think, however, we have to be grounded in fact. He has not performed to expectation in ESCOM. The appointment of Jabu Mabuza has proved to be a controversial one as chairman of the ESCOM board, because on the one hand there's a conflict of interest that he has been implicated in relation to this energy company which has been winning boiler contract repair tenders And there are questions which have been raised by credible reporting around his link and how that actually transpired. You know, there were messaging, confusing messages coming out of Eskom when we were going through the power crisis. One was sabotage, the other one was wet coal, and that kind of messaging speaks to failures of leadership to actually put the right diagnosis on the problem. Because if you come to me one day and you say, listen, it's wet coal, and I'm like, but don't you have to, you know, doesn't it get wet at some point in the process anyway? Then you say, no, it's not wet coal anymore, it's sabotage. And then you come and you tell the country with conviction, we're not going to have power outages until such and such a date. And then you are contradicted by the reality that we actually did have those power outages. This speaks to a misplacement perhaps of Minister Gordhan in that particular dispensation. Other analysts have argued, you know, there was an article that was saying that maybe he should be moved to a financial role, one which is dealing more with governance within the ministries as opposed to this power generation capacity. Now, the other debate around whether or not the placement of Eskom should be in the Department of Minerals and Energy, I actually think that that's a fair case to make, because we do know that one of the biggest consumers of power in South Africa is actually the mining sector. So it makes sense to actually put that particular portfolio in one bucket as opposed to have it separate, if indeed minerals and power are so closely linked. And I want to say that Gwede Mantashe actually has a better case for running Eskom. One of those attributes he has is that he has actually worked quite in depth with the unions. There's going to have to be a lot of face time with the unions to restructure Eskom in an effective way. So if you get somebody who has got no real connection with union movements and you put them in to go do difficult negotiations with unions, what's your likelihood of success? I think that likelihood of success is low. When it comes to ideology, I think that we must all recognize that the ANC is an organization that is governed by policies, rules, etc., etc. If you come into leadership under the ANC, you have to respect its resolutions. And I think a lot of people who've been going offside on the ANC resolutions are putting themselves against the organization, because the branches are the ones that went and voted and said, we want to privatize, we want to nationalize the Reserve Bank. They put those resolutions in the conference document. And if you go to, I think it's page 33, and you read resolution 27 on land, you'll see what they were saying. If you read the particular resolutions. So we need to be very careful not to draw ourselves in as a public or as side groups within the ANC, because these votes have already been made. It's almost like calling for a second referendum to say, I know you voted at the conference, but can we actually change that policy resolution on the Reserve Bank?
All right, some of the ANC veterans here saying that there's just too much of emphasis or focus, Jamie, on one individual, and it's actually deflecting from the real issues of looting and corruption. Can we really justifiably hold one minister accountable for the rot that's set in so many of our SOEs many years ago already?
So I don't think that one person is responsible, but I do think when we're talking about competence, when we're talking about execution, if indeed people want Pravin to fight corruption at the highest level, maybe they should make a corruption body where he can go and fight corruption and catch everybody. But if indeed we want the power to be generated at Eskom, we may need to put somebody there who has the capacity to deliver on that mandate. Right now, we're almost at the back end of the Moody period, where Moody's gave us a period of 90 days to get our act in order. One of the biggest triggers of their assessment of South Africa being negative, and they're close to giving us junk status, was fix the mess at Eskom. Right? The same thing that the World Bank said. They said that they're downgrading South Africa's economic growth this year to 0.9% on the basis of the challenges that are facing Eskom. So whilst we do need to fight corruption as an urgent thing because it is a perennial problem in South African politics, we also need to make sure that Eskom gets its act together. So I think that people are conflating these two issues. The idea that Pravin is a good minister is one, in terms of character integrity. He may need to be placed somewhere else. The idea of power generation, however, what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months at Eskom, has not really inspired anybody's confidence. And that's really the bottom line. If you can't get your messaging together, if you are giving the president of the country conflicting information, and it may not have come from Pravin, but we can begin to look at ESCOM and say, guys, the plan that you came up with, the first plan you came up with, is not working. It's time for us to look at a plan B. That may be a cabinet reshuffle, that may be more interventions, but I don't think that everything that is being said around the minister and his challenges in performance in this particular portfolio are unfair, and we have to separate those. And those who want to fight the ideological battles of the ANC, I think that those people have to recognize that there was a conference, right? Those votes already were made. If they want to overturn those votes, they have to wait for the 55th National Conference, because that's how the ANC makes decisions. You can't just willy-nilly come with a different position. And this is what Tito Mboweni was confronted with, because the resolution on the Reserve Bank was made, right? And it was made, and it's actually resolution 27, 28, and 29, right? They were made. People say they want a flexible monetary policy regime. They don't want the Reserve Bank to function in a way that is controlled by the state, but they do want it to be 100% owned by the state. So when the minister then goes against the party, the governing party, which has already resolved at its own conference that this is how they're going to do it, then you're actually trying to defeat the democratic structure of South African politics, because the people voted in the party. This is what they want. This is the mandate under which you're running. So even if you want to make some reforms, you have to find ways to persuade the party that, or maybe bring corporate in to say, listen, corporate, you guys are sitting on 1.4 trillion in reserves. How can you meet me halfway so that we can reboot the economy? Because my party has already resolved on A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If you guys have these concerns, how do we fix them without me going offside the party?
All right, whichever way you look at it, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been keenly watched at this juncture in terms of the caliber leadership. Many are saying that it's a time for him to step up and really show some backbone. One wonders how he will handle this situation now, Jamie, given that he's got to address public sector corruption, like you're saying, which we know has spread across the state, including provincial governments and our key public institutions at that.
So there's two things that I think the president needs to do. One, he needs to find a way to make peace with the branches, because right now he's seen to be operating on a DA manifesto, because he's going almost against the resolutions of the party. And this is what creates the confrontation with what people are calling the fight back faction. So he has to make peace with the fact that he is an ANC president running on an ANC mandate, and go back and sell his vision for the people to those branches. But at the second level, he then has to make some bold decisions around, and this may be time for him to do a cabinet reshuffle. He has to do that, to restructure his cabinet, because his cabinet is not optimum right now. Dealing with corruption is part of that, but he also needs to bring his corporate friends to the party in a bigger way. A lot of pledges were made, but those pledges are not translating to anything that the public can see as transformative in their lives. So everybody is thinking right now, the president has ticked the boxes of Sandton, but he hasn't ticked the boxes of Soweto. If he wants to be a strong leader who is safe in the ANC, those branches are what are going to protect him in the long run. The ANC is a party of branches. You can only run amok of the branches for a short period of time. The people who are saying he wants to be a one-term president are worried that he hasn't persuaded the branches. So the president needs to go back to the branches, and he needs to do something for the public.
Independent political analyst Jamie Mighti joining us on the news desk this afternoon. Thank you so much for sharing those invaluable insights with us. Well, time now to take